We are at the Renault Tech Center here in Chennai, and we're going to take you around this cut section for some really interesting details on Renault's new platform that underpins the Duster. Now, Renault call it the RGMP, the Renault Global Modular Platform. It does have its bones in the CMFB platform, but it's different, and they say it's different because of certain hard points being changed for India, and also the ENE architecture, the electrical and electronics architecture is very different on this one, on the India Duster. So, for example, you have the Google integration for the entire infotainment and the car's electronics. That can't be done on the CMFB. However, this one, it has been modified with this new ENE architecture, and therefore Renault says it is different, and so they call it the RGMP. So that's about the platform. Now, another very unique thing about the India Duster, the overall height of the India Duster is 50 mm taller than the European Duster. Now, that taller height doesn't just come through an increased ground clearance, it's also because the flow to the roof height is also increased for India. Yeah, and why they've done that very interestingly is because in India we love sunroofs, so they had to put a panoramic sunroof, which isn't there in the European Duster. And because of the panoramic sunroof, you need to liberate some headroom. Therefore, you have a taller cabin. So yeah, the India Duster is taller as well. If you can come around, I will also show you some things they've done for crash safety. So for example, Renault says this car has been engineered for a 5-star crash rating, and what they've done is there are 3 load paths. Some cars use 2 load paths to absorb all the crush, the energy. So there's a load path here, there's a load path here, and there is one down here. This is like the additional one. You'll typically see this in EVs when there's more weight and more mass, so you need more of this area. But Renault have done this for the Duster too. So really, I'm sure you've seen some people going around the cars, pressing on the fenders and saying, "Oh, look, it's not safe because it's too flimsy." Those parts are not designed to handle load, right? Where all of the load happens, the load absorption happens, is here inside the monocoque. So really, don't worry about thinner fenders. They should be thin for weight saving. What is needed is areas like this to absorb the crush. Okay, now while front and side impact is part of the NCAP test, Renault says they've also tested the new Duster for rear impact to prevent severe intrusions for up to 50 kilometers per hour with a full overlap. So they have taken care of that. And in fact, they say there's 57% of this monocoque is built with high strength steel. 57%, whenever you say that, it's generally by weight. Now the suspension, the front uses fairly standard McPherson strut suspension, and you've got the anti-roll bar, and that's painted here in this mustard yellow shade, as you can see. Now, very interesting in terms of the suspension, the rear, if we go here, it is a twist beam suspension, which means it's a semi-independent suspension. Now, a twist beam suspension is like a C shape, and it kind of twists this way, and so you get a natural anti-roll bar benefit. However, what Renault have done is they have added an anti-roll bar inside the twist beam too. And what they say, what they can therefore do is sort of tune it separately, both for ride and for handling. What happens without the anti-roll bar, your twist beam is a sort of compromise between the amount of twist that you'll have for a better ride, and you'll go softer on the bushes, but then handling goes for a toss. So with this, they can kind of try and achieve both objectives. And this, if I'm not mistaken, is also something that the previous Duster had. Okay, so this platform can do 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive, but uniquely, Renault says they can do a 4-wheel drive with a propeller shaft, like a conventional system, but they can also do an e-axle. So you'll have the electrically driven rear axle and, of course, the engine driving the front. That's the kind of flexibility Renault says they have with this platform. And of course, that means they've got multiple powertrain options too. So you've got, of course, internal combustion. It can do hybrid. It can do full electric, CNG too. In fact, they're ready for a CNG packaging system as well. And of course, the engines can also take on higher blends of ethanol. So you can do flex fuels too. Okay, so the other difference between the European platform, the CMFB, well, that wasn't really ready for electrification, full-on electrification, and also doing sub-4 meter vehicles. This RGMP, which is, like I said, heavily modified CMFB, can do sub 4 meter vehicles very comfortably. You can do smaller ones, which is what our market requires, and full EVs too. Okay, so this is the 1.3 liter direct injection turbo engine that Renault uses on the Duster, and it develops a very impressive 160 horsepower and 280 Newton meters of torque. That are very high power figures. Now, how does that do that? Very uniquely, it is a direct injection system, but it uses 2 injections per stroke. So the first injection is for better mixing, so you get a more homogeneous mixture of fuel and air. And then the second injection is closer to the ignition time when the spark ignites. And therefore, Renault says they're able to achieve good fuel efficiency and a lot of power. Now, other bits on the engine, the valve timing, both the exhaust and the intake is a variable valve timing. And you've also got the engine ready for E85. They say this can go up to E85. It's also ready for the next level of emission norms. It uses, in fact, a gasoline particulate filter. So Renault are not worried about emissions. In fact, that's over here, as you can see, just below the turbo. And the turbocharger, yes, it is of course waste gated. So during normal driving, you won't have all of the turbo's input. So that really is the 1.3 liter engine that is going to be in the Renault. The other unique bit of the engine is there aren't any liners. What Renault have done is they've spray coated the cylinders inside with what they call the Power Glide coating. It's basically to reduce friction, and they say the coating is set for life. The gearbox, now you don't see that over here. That's basically after this part, which is the clutch unit. So the gearbox is a dual clutch unit. And very interestingly, it's a wet clutch. So as you know, you can have a dry clutch and you can have a wet clutch DCT. The dry clutch, of course, you save some weight, you save some cost and things like that. But for Indian conditions, it does tend to wear out. And manufacturers are slowly sort of introducing the wet clutch system. So there is some lubrication for the gearbox and the clutch plates. So that's really what Renault have done. And because of the wet clutch system, Renault says they can actually speed up the changes without the fear of the components wearing out.